welcome everybody to this meeting and get ready to get into the discussions of people I know. They have just done me one favor of not letting the Vice-Chancellor of Makerere come. Being my boss, I wouldn't know how to stop him. This is not to say Professor Hisali is not my boss, but that's a different level. We can see how we solve that one. The other one is a higher level engagement. We have questions for them, but quite often I always want to give professionals and practitioners a blank check. To say in 1 minute, add whatever introduction that were made, anything that might have been left out that you want to tell us, but also take that minute to speak to the theme of the day. Before I give you my own guidance, why don't you speak to the theme of the day and let me run from the nearest to the farthest. So Deputy ED, you know the theme. I'm sure you came with something itching on your mind that you want to tell us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fred. All protocol observed. I am here to represent the Executive Director, Dr. Muvawala, who was not able to make it. But first and foremost, let me, on behalf of the National Planning Authority, associate very much the importance of the conference, because it brings into the perspective the progress that we as a country in Uganda are making towards the achievement of the Agenda 2030, but also Agenda 2063. And if you'd like me to mention very quickly that as a country, we are very proud to be one of the highest ranked in terms of the alignment of our development planning processes to, first of all, the Agenda 2030 itself. Then you come down to the Agenda 2063. And in this regard, allow me to thank the UN resident coordinator, who just about 2 weeks ago was able to support the National Planning Authority with an expert, whereby we are developing the national planning and the reporting tool. You supported us from, rather with an expert from the UNECA, United Economic Commission for Africa. And in his assessment, he told us that Uganda has the highest alignment to those development frameworks, ranked at about 70%. We are the highest among the region. So therefore, Dr. Fred, today as we reflect on the progress that has been made, we should also be proud to say categorically that in terms of our planning processes, we are doing very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in talking about alignment, I want to withdraw the blank check from my professor. One of the alignment programs of government is Parish Development Model.
Thank you, my colleague, Dr. Muhumuza. With the support of the United Nations Development Program in Uganda, we are working on an initiative that we have called the PDM Lab, the Parish Development Model Policy Laboratory. Now, what is this whole idea of the laboratory and what are we doing in it there? Just like any other lab, we are just providing a platform for testing and recommending those interventions that we think will improve the implementation of the parish development model. So where do we get these preliminary ideas that we are sending to the lab for testing? We commission studies so that we generate preliminary evidence from background papers. But we also take advantage of international experience. Some of these initiatives have been rolled out elsewhere on the continent and in other places. But we also want to benefit from emerging issues. The PDM has been around us at the implementation stage now for slightly over a year, and there is feedback that has started coming in, and we want to put that to discussion and try to make sense of what is coming in. So yes, we provide that platform. We have the source of the raw information that then we subject to deeper analysis, to stakeholder engagement, and out of that, we should be able to get, to suggest improvements that require to be made as we continue with the implementation. So that's the brief background to the lab. And in terms of the structure, we have an oversight structure called the Steering Committee, headed by Office of the President, Professor Ezra Suruma. And then we have the Technical Committee that Makerere University is currently chairing, but with a number of MDAs, including the Bureau of Statistics, the Ministry of Local Government, our development partners, and the National Planning Authority.
Thank you. I hope people are taking observations of what is happening to talk about the 70% alignment. We need the other 30% covered, and the labs are supposed to help us not to lose ground on the 70, but to also gain on the 30. Now, before I get to the statistics people, I know what comes out of labs quite often is statistics. Let me use the prerogative of the blank chair I left there to take a break and recognize the following. No, it's not right, Honorable, these are protocol things. Honorable Margaret Muhanga, Minister of State for Health, welcome. We appreciate your presence here. Honorable Muruli Mukasa, Minister of Public Service. We appreciate the time you have given to this event. These are at the central focus of delivering the SDGs. I'll be asking the SDG people, remember this is the second annual Sustainable Development Goals Conference. What happened in the first one? I don't know whether we have any statistics yet, but let me cross over to my friend. The Bureau of Statistics, Dr. Mukiza. Out there are many things that are happening in the statistics world, and we are told that in inclusive data systems, they have never been important than today. When to leave no one behind, then the data must be inclusive. It's those individuals and communities who are farthest behind. And I'm not talking about the people farthest behind there because the microphones are reaching them, that are likely to remain voiceless and invisible. Question is, how our national development plans that we develop based on your statistics, what is UBOS doing to build inclusive data systems and ecosystems to ensure everyone has a voice and is visible to the planners?
Thank you, Moderator. Good morning all, protocol observed. As you've seen from the presentation from the Secretariat, much of the discussion was premised on the data. And you have seen how we have progressed gradually but steadily to 121 indicators out of the 2001 that we promised to provide for monitoring the performance of SDGs. by the end of this year, we shall be able to provide 150 indicators. Now, when SDGs came to the fore, we of course aligned our statistical production and dissemination to NDP 3. NDP 1 and NDP 3 by developing a plan for national statistical development that covers the entire national statistical system. National statistical system involves all the producers, users, academia, as we have heard, and private sector. And those members in the plan are developing strategic plans for statistics in order to cover all indicators in the indicator framework of the NDP, which we have been told is aligned 70%. At the Bureau, our strategic plan for statistics has a theme of transformation using digital technology and innovation, so that we move beyond the traditional data sources. The notable ones are censuses, surveys, and administrative data, to harnessing other non-traditional data sources, using geospatial technologies, artificial intelligence, and data science. I want to mention that even those traditional data sources, we don't leave anyone behind. All the categories, the other subgroups that are vulnerable and left behind by policymakers are covered by statistics, and data exists. The main challenge to all of us is how we intentionally must use these statistics to inform decision making. We know that you cannot manage what you can't measure. Or the other way, you cannot, in order to manage it, you should first measure. So, even the retro indicator, the few indicators we have, how are we using them in decision making and the policy formulation to reach those people that are being left behind? And that's the challenge I'm giving to all the users of statistics. Now, in the non-traditional data sources, we also worked with the development partners to develop citizen-generated data handbook, because as they operate, they generate a lot of data. Citizens include those minorities and vulnerable groups. We are soon conducting the National Population Housing Census. I think this will be an announcement. And many of the indicators and those people that are normally left, especially minority tribes, minority communities, those in refugees and refugee host communities will be counted. And once we count them, we know where they are, how many they are, how they live. Then it will be upon the decision makers and policy people to ensure that they use that statistics fully. I think I have attempted to answer your question.
You've not only attempted, you have answered it, but in the process excited me to create another question, which will come to you in another round. You said we can't manage what we can't measure. But these days, I know we can't measure what we can't manage. They call it big data. Even as we are here, Google knows I am here. Surely you can't manage Google. But between me and Google, we are generating data. I've just paid my electricity bill, so my people home can go back or avoid going off. Google knows that payment. Umeme might know about that payment. So when I get back to you, I will be looking for conversations on how can we harness, harvest, analyze, and draw lessons from big data. People are right now doing lots of things. And that data is needed for us to understand. There are those who have not been left behind and who must not be left behind, but there are those who are already in front. Quite often we lose them. And they are running ahead of us and we can't manage them. But we need information about them. That's a question we shall have in our conversation. Madam Evelyn, Letio is the other name.
Yes, please.
Why don't you tell us more about yourself, the subject, but also I want to hear from you. There's that finding from the Global Gender Social Norm Index of 2023 that is saying close to 90% of the people, both women and men, have at least one bias in gender social norms. What are the implications of this toward the achievement of SDGs in Uganda? First of all, what are these social norms? Tell us, because some of us may not know them, and those biases in those social norms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always hard to talk about myself. I have many things to say. But anyway, my name is Evelyn Letio, and I work with UN Women. I lead the thematic area of work on ending violence against women. But today, I wear very big shoes and sitting in for the representative from UN Women, Dr. Paulina Chiwangu. She's in New York for a leadership conference and couldn't be here, but she's monitoring us. And hopefully one day I will wear the shoes permanently and not just for a few days. Regarding the theme, I think the words that stand out for me are inclusive, and I hope that by the end of the 2 days, we can really unpack what that inclusiveness means. And as we try to move away from the 17% we have in terms of our report card on how we are performing, that inclusiveness, if we unpack it, really gives us the answers and the directions that we are going to take moving forward. But you've asked me to speak a little bit about the Gender Social Norms Index. And the 9 out of 10 people globally that have at least one bias, gender bias. So I'm looking at the numbers here, and I don't know, maybe we are 300. And what that tells us is that about 270, so almost all of us here have some gender bias in us. This data is drawn from 4 broad areas. It looked at biases around political participation, biases around education, biases around economics, employment, and biases around physical integrity that are related to issues around physical violence and sexual reproductive health. And so I think for me, while it's depressing, because we know that we have not registered significant shifts around biases in the last 10 years, I think it points us to what needs to be done, but also the criticality of addressing social norms if we are going to achieve the SDGs and also our national development goals. So just, I think to put a few things into perspective for me, there is an illusion, and when you speak to very many people, there is the feeling that lives of women have really changed. And that sometimes the efforts that we are putting particular entities like us, UN Women, around gender equality are over-exaggerated. People are quick to say, but there are so many girls in schools. If you look at the architecture of the government of Uganda, there's so many women. Oh my God, it's actually the boy child that is now being disadvantaged. And sometimes, especially for us who are very Kampala-centric, that almost starts to make sense. But when you look at data that globally is saying 9 out of 10 have a gender bias in those indicators. And when you pack it further, it says, for example, that 60% of people believe men make better leaders than women. So basically, as women are going to the ballot boxes, as women are going for job interviews, as women are going, in the public sector, there is the bias over 60%, that woman is not good enough. So as we are seated here, 60% of us are thinking, the Vice President of Uganda shouldn't be a woman. A man could do better. We don't actually think Anne is doing a good job at Stanbic. A man could do better. Just, looking at that. And equally, same number of people are thinking, in terms of economics, women, they can do something, but they need to stay more at home and take care of the family. And that's where the unpaid care work and all those things are taking place. And 30% of the same people are saying, university education, not necessary for women. So while we have made progress in terms of enrollment of girls in school, I think we start to see the norms that are affecting retention and the norms that are affecting transition of girls into higher echelons of education. And then when you come to physical autonomy, 70%, 75% whooping believe it's okay for violence to happen. It's a small issue. People can talk about it. And when it comes to sexual reproductive health, really do not even go there. So what does this exactly mean for us in terms of the SDGs and delivering on them? And bringing home to Uganda, those statistics resonate with our statistics in country. So when we start to question why are girls not transitioning through schools, it's because we hold those norms that education, it's okay, but not too much education. When we start to even ask, I remember sometime we were discussing why we are not having gender parity when it comes to women's representation in politics. And we were asking, there are women that are so seasoned. They've been in politics for so long, 20 years in parliament. Why are they still on affirmative action? Why can't they stand out with the men? And I think this index helps us to see that it's tough to go for that with men. You have your own voices and your own value systems that are saying, let me not go there. But you also have the society that is saying, really, should you be going there? And so you start to see, the adage of the sticky floors for women and the glass ceiling. As I want to jump, but something is really holding us here. And so I think in terms of really SDGs, what we see here is all the 17 SDGs. As long as we don't address social norms, as long as all this that we are holding, 9 out of 10 of us here, do not start interrogating those deeply held values that we have, attitudes that we have, then we are not going to be on track for SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that explanation. Look at your table. 9 out of 10. Now, some of you, the figure is bigger because you are not 10 on that table. So it is possibly 1.5 of you has a bias, more than you. Question is, which bias do you have? Is it about the women? Is it about the children? Is it about a certain tribe? Is it about a certain height? Is it about a certain, what bias do you have? Because these are social norm biases, and there are quite many. And leave no one behind. Some of us, we work with our research minds. And 2 weeks ago, I looked through my students' list as I was beginning to compile their coursework results. And one student had done the first coursework, but not the second. So I called the class representative. I said, I don't want to leave anyone behind. What happened to this person who didn't do the second coursework? He had dropped out of school even before the semester could close. This is a third-year student. left with 1 semester to finish, dropped out of school. So these things are real. We're talking about real human beings. Behind the numbers are people out there. And many of the partners who have helped us move on, and we can't wind up. You know why I've only zeroed in on that name. Not only the other names hard for me, but this one also speaks to, we are not going to wind up this business of SDGs. Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Denmark, you have been a key partner in rolling out these and localization of the SDGs. They are global, but we've been localizing them in Uganda. I want you to share with the people here some of your reflections on the recent SDG localization efforts, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great honor to be here. I've been asked to speak a bit about the SDGs and localization and what we have been doing. And I wanted to speak about 2 different ways in which we've tried to support localization of SDGs in Uganda. One is about the awareness raising and the information and the involvement, and another one is more practical in terms of how we do it in but first of all, I think it's important to realize that with the SDGs, also coming from what we just heard presented of how far we all have a role to play. So it's not a job of one government or one institution. It's really the global goals. That's also why we call it the global goals. So even for us as development partners, we have a role to play in supporting the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals in Uganda. And the way we do it has a big impact on how well we can actually achieve it. So something is about the way we are working with the SDGs. One of the priorities for us in terms of localization is really looking globally as how can we shift power and resources towards local actors. Local actors, especially in the global south, in countries like Uganda, how can we make sure that our support actually enhances the capacity of local actors and not just central actors? And how can we ensure that the needs and the interests of local actors are at the core of what we do, in terms of identifying needs, in terms of identifying priorities, in terms of planning and implementation. And one of the things is the more, you could say, popular and festive way, what has been going on in Uganda for the past weeks, the local SDG festivals that Denmark has been supported. We heard the PS speaking about it. We went to Jinja, to Mbarara, to Mobende, to Lira, in what was called the Joint Initiative for Accelerating the SDG Implementation in Uganda. That initiative, or that partnership, actually originated from 23 Ugandans coming to an SDG course in Denmark. The 23 became SDG champions. Many of them are here today. I've met several of you now. And one of the things they identified in this course was a need to strengthen the SDG awareness and localization in Uganda. As we also heard from the presentation, the awareness of the SDGs at the local level were not very high. This is true for my country as well. Although we've been speaking about SDGs for so long since it came out, there's still limited knowledge. So the need to actually go out there in the whole country to speak about the SDGs was identified. And then this idea of organizing these festivals with the purpose of engaging people in a, as we heard, in a fun way, in an engaging way, and getting people to think about what does the SDGs mean for us, what are our needs locally, and getting people actively involved at the local level, and starting to think about how can we actually use these SDGs that are for all of us to ask our local governments, ask our local councillors, ask our government to focus on us, to hold them accountable as well. So we are looking a lot forward to August, where there'll be a national festival, bringing in all the information, all the ideas from the local festivals into the national level. So that's one of the things that we do. Just creating awareness, starting conversations, using it to understand that this is something that belongs to all of us. Then a little bit more about the more technical in terms of how we do our programs, because it's also quite important that we take localization very seriously in the way we support Uganda in our development engagements. We have a lot of bilateral programs at country level. We are developing a new program, 2023-2027. And one of the things we do as development partners as Denmark is that we align these programs very, very closely with the national and local policies. We look at the choice of implementation modalities and the choice of partners in deciding how can we get as close as possible to the local levels. I give you a few examples. We have a program targeting refugees and host communities in northern Uganda. We've been having programs like that for many decades. One program is building resilience and climate and supporting climate-smart agriculture and jobs. The other one is providing sexual and reproductive health and rights to the communities. And in these programs, we put the support of local capacity and leadership at the core. So we are utilizing existing local structures and systems to the extent possible, working with the local district governments at parish level, working with the local district plans, the local authorities, not just working with them in terms of planning, but really utilizing the local structures to understand what are the needs, what should be the plans, but also involve in implementation and in monitoring. And I think it speaks to what he's talking about in terms of data. We do joint monitoring with the local district authorities, with the local CSOs, with the local private sector to actually go and monitor the progress of our projects so that we make sure that jointly we have accountability for what we're delivering on the ground. Wanted to speak to two other really important actors to support in terms of localization, and one is the local civil society organizations. Civil society organizations have a crucial role to play in realizing SDGs and localization. Luckily, Uganda has a very strong, very active civil society who are very engaged at many levels, especially also local level. So in our programs, we've supported numerous civil society organizations, and the vast majorities of these have been local organizations. And this is something that we continue to push for, that we push more and more funds directly to local organizations and try to look for new ways of funding so we get closer to the ground. Another important partner that we often forget and we don't talk about is the private sector. The private sector has a huge role to play as well on the localization agenda. We are also pushing for very strong local involvement and leadership and ownership. So one of the core organizations that we co-funded is Uganda Development, a local-led financial organization supporting local financial institutions, and through that creating hundreds and thousands of jobs in the agriculture sector. So going through the local financial institutions and trying to work with the grassroots levels, that can be through SACCOs, VSLAs, all the way down. So we try to work with localization in our programs. I also want to share with you that I think we can still do better. This goes for us as Denmark, and I can only speak for myself, but we are also pushing our UN partners and others to continue to do better on this. And I wanted to share just a few of the challenges before I finish. I think one of the things we should do better is to continue to work on new ways, more ways to find suitable and direct funding modalities to local actors. This is always difficult. There's a balance in terms of capacity and accountability, but we need to continue to work with our modalities. We also need to continue to strengthen the inclusion of all, and the mutual accountability in our programming. And one of the things we will aim to work more with is the local-led organizations or the constituency-led organizations, exactly those that you have pointed out in your analysis that are left behind. So these are organizations left by youth, by women, by refugees, or people living with disabilities or sicknesses. trying to work directly with the constituency-led organizations will allow them to have a stronger voice, and hopefully we can work together on leaving no one behind by working with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for saying thank you. By those claps, they could have been louder and harder. I appreciate that. Let's leave no one behind. I'm still waiting for UN men so that I can get myself a job. That's the 9% and the 1%. Some social biases out there. But I think she's raised, and the conversation is really raising an important thing of localization. And I'm going to come to the NPA, Honorable Ojok, soon to speak about what came out of the midterm review of the NDP. I hate it when the entire conversation about girl child dropping out of school emerges after UNEB releases results. And then we say, where are the girls? Oh, they entered 8 million. Where are the others? Yet we know the teachers do roll call every day. Every day. What do we use that data for? Growing up, would always know this child who sits next to me didn't come on Monday, didn't come on Tuesday, and the teacher would be informed he's sick, or lost a relative, or changed schools. Do we use this community data to really blend in? I've just given my own experience. When one child didn't submit coursework, I said, where is this one? And I took an effort and discovered it. So before they even drop out of school, what has happened to them? Localization of this conversation is key, and one of the key actors in that is civil society. The voices of the people being left out behind there. I can't forget my auntie. She's now a practicing doctor in her possibly 70s, but she was admitted in Gayaza many years back in the 70s and did not turn up, because the father felt Gayaza was so far away from Bushenyi. Why do you go to Gayaza? So he took her to Maryhill, didn't drop out of school. The head teacher in Gayaza said, where is this girl? Wrote a letter to Bushenyi, find me this girl. The next time, she was in Gayaza. Are we that serious in leaving no one behind, or is it just terminologies and languages? These are real people we are talking about here. We did the midterm review. Somebody here was asking, do we even need an NDP4? Why don't we just print the midterm review and move on for the next 5 years? You've had the Danes already revising up to 2027. You've already given them signals they will use. Now they don't want to produce their document today, and in NDP4, 3 years from now, you have written something different. What lessons really came out, especially in terms of reducing vulnerabilities and inequalities? What did we learn from the midterm review? These people need to listen and capture that in order to synchronize with government. Honorable Ojok.
Thank you very much, Dr. Again, I think in order to anchor my discussion in this conference, I would like to start from qualifying the fact that our planning process, as I said earlier, is highly inclusive. Secondly, in terms of understanding our national development planning framework, we are guided, as I said, by the global targets, by the continental, the regional, and the national vision 2040. So to that extent, planning in this country is very highly inclusive. Why do I say this? As a process, when we are formulating our plans, as you all know, we are now in NDP 3, but I can as well take you back to say, we came from NDP 1, NDP 2, now we are in NDP 3. The formulation of a development plan for Uganda is highly participatory for all citizens of the country. Of course, by this I don't mean that we would ideally meet everyone to get their views, but we interact to a large extent with the representatives of the different sections of society. Number 3, I want the conference to take note of the fact that our planning is also human rights based. Actually, we have some very good support from the GIZ to this extent. We do highly include all the different groupings that were referred to by Dr. Albert Biamugisha in his presentation. NPA has gone to include the minority groupings, the different members of society, the private sector, the development actors, as well as the civil society. We always engage. And then the process goes even up to parliament, actually cabinet, parliament, and the plan is approved. So to that extent, I want you to be rest assured that NPA does not sit in a corner to have a document that we call a plan by itself. No, it's all inclusive. And by the theme of the conference, promoting inclusive national and continental actions, so this is really, we are qualifying this. We are guided by that framework. In other words, we can say National Planning Authority collates the formulation of this process, but it understands the fact that we think globally, but act nationally. Or you could say, think globally and act locally. So to that extent, I want this to be underlined, that we are all inclusive in terms of the intentions of the plan. The fourth point is now to come to the midterm review. Yeah, the midterm review was commanded by our development framework, which compels the National Planning Authority at the midpoint of the implementation of the plan. We do need to ask ourselves, how have we moved? How have we progressed? Just like we did for NDP 1 and NDP 2, we did the same. We did the midterm review. We also carried out the end term evaluation. So, Doctor, you quickly said, why should we even have the next plan? Our legal framework provides for a 5-year plan. But that does not mean we do not carry what we were doing in one plan to the next plan. But as a matter of complying with our requirements in executing the planning function, we will remain guided by our legal framework. So that's the reason we will need to do NDP 4. Now, the conference needs to note that why do we have a plan? We have a development plan because it articulates the clear understanding of the issues that we face as a country. And I will use quickly one proxy of the measure of vulnerability, poverty. In developing and formulating the plan, the analysis is done to show what is our level of poverty. If you use poverty as a proxy measure for vulnerability, it will show you clearly that within the country, there are sections of the society that are more poor than others. We have the poverty maps, thanks to the work of our colleagues from the Bureau of Statistics we have the poverty maps. Now, it therefore means, as we design the plan, we are informed by our understanding of poverty across the country. You will refer to the theme of the current plan. The current plan, its theme is sustainable industrialization for inclusive employment and wealth creation. Now, it will tell you, therefore, we intend to be, the plan aspires to have an inclusive approach to addressing the development issues of the country. But also, we quickly will agree that the design of the government programs in terms of interventions, in the plan we currently have 20 programs. When you look at all of them, they are focused at addressing the issues that have remained as the key drivers or the key triggers to poverty within the country. So these programs are designed, therefore, to mitigate, and they also prescribe government interventions that will be addressing issues that, if addressed, we hope to improve on our poverty numbers. Moderator, you'll allow me, you know, being a panelist, you are between a fast-moving train and a slow-moving train, in order to keep, first of all, your audience engaged, but also providing the adequate information. So you'll allow me, therefore, to be picking my issues across the midterm review. They are quite wide, but I will try and focus on a few. Now, the midterm review was an assessment. In doing this assessment, we consulted with many of you. You all know this and you remember this. Now, the findings were clearly that we had suffered some shocks. During the implementation of the plan, we all remember the locusts. We remember the COVID-19 pandemic. You do remember the floods. You do remember the most talked about, the Ukraine-Russia war. This clearly had an overall effect on the performance of the plan implementation. The plan had targets. Now, for instance, we had targets to improve on our income poverty. We had targets to generate, through the private sector, decent jobs. We had targets to reduce the extent of vulnerability across the society. But all of these we found out, they were negatively affected. But nevertheless, allow me to say, from within the region, you remember the lockdowns. We had 2 serious lockdowns. But in spite of that, the midterm review findings were interesting, so to speak, because we are one of the few countries in the region that still registered positive growth. There were countries in the continent that went below zero growth and went into negative. I will not quote them since this is a global conference, but you can check. There were countries that went that low. But for Uganda, I think the lowest we came to was initially 2.8 growth, that went to 3.1, 3.3, and we kept coming up. What does this show? The plan in its implementation had the right focus, and so government interventions were able to render our economy resilient. You all remember how we were able to do a very quick import substitution replacement. Sanitizers came from within. Even though most of the enterprises, the factories, had to close in terms of the lockdowns, but government, in its wisdom, undertook to guide that we did not need to close the factories, we did not need to close the enterprises, we did not need to close the markets. I think, Dr. Fred, this was one of the things that positively impacted overall in the performance of our economy. And the other thing that I would like to point out, okay, time is of negative essence to me. Now, so what then are we saying as National Planning Authority? We had, as a result of the findings of the midterm review, we had to switch on a reprioritization gear. Government reprioritized, it cut down on unnecessary expenditure, there was a budget suppression. We focused on those key growth areas which were meant to revamp the economy. And I think we have done well. Now our current growth rate is standing at about 5.2, going to 5.3, hopefully, by the end of this financial year. So the midterm review, therefore, is going forward, is going to further inform us on how we are going to focus on key priorities in formulating the NDP4. What do you may ask yourself, what would we like to see in the formulation of the next plan? We would like to see the government continue to invest in areas where there will be multiplier effects. We also we hope to see government continuing to reduce its appetite for debt financing of the plan implementation. You know where we are on the debt numbers. We have remained vulnerable, and so we are saying, and we do hope in the next plan, we should cut down our appetite and work with what we have. We also think that the fourth plan should take into account the ongoing projects. Even though of course, we thank Cabinet and they have taken a decision to stay any new projects, but have laid emphasis on continuing to implement those key strategic projects, even if it's through loans, that will have a positive effect on the overall performance of the economy. So we thank government for that we have, in a way, taken steps to already say we do not need to take excessive loans. We also want to see, Dr. Fred, that as we do the plan, the fourth plan, we need to scale down. Maybe the NDP3 was very ambitious. We want to see a reduction in the scope. Many things are right in the NDP3, but given our limited fiscal space, we clearly see we need to scale down on those projects that will have very high impact. And I think since you've looked at me 3 and this is the 4th time, I just have to be fair enough and stop it there for now. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ojok. He had actually entered into my other question to him. That's why I wanted him to keep it for that time. The Baganda call it kubobeza. Don't serve the food before it has spent some time on the fire, but he has served it. And thank you very much, because it helps us to further the conversation, knowing what the future holds. I really want to appreciate that knowledge and sharing, but also scaling down the appetite. I hear that conversation. The technocrats are planning for $55 billion Uganda size of the economy soon. The president is saying, no, 500. There is some appetite there to harmonize within the government circles. This meeting and conversation is also about you. So where are those microphones? Where are those hands of those who want to make interventions? We did have questions for you. So you can answer your own question or you can ask your own question. It's only those two things. You either want to ask your own question to the panel or even to anybody. We shall capture the question and find the right person to answer it, or even take it back to chew the card on it, or you may want to make a submission. Over to you, our beloved audience here. Do we have an audience online as well? I don't want to miss them out. I see a hand over there, that's number 1. I see number 2. I see number 3. I really wanted to push up to number 7 for the obvious reason, but let me first say 1, 2, and 3. There is 4. All right, let's first deal with those 1, 2, 3, and 4. I hope you remember your numbers. Please mention your name when you stand, where you're coming from, your comment, and be brief so that I can pick as many as possible.
I am Patrick Okela, Commissioner Human Resource Management in the Office of the Prime Minister. My first question is to National Planning Authority, and really to seek clarification on to what extent our current national planning framework is responsive to the implementation of the SDGs. And secondly, to seek further clarity on how we can motivate the local population to appreciate and participate in the implementation of the SDGs. The second goes to...
That is the third one, actually.
The third goes to the Vice-Chancellor. He talked about the PDM lab in Makerere, and I wanted to know the relationship between this PDM lab with the PDM Secretariat and the Strategic Coordination Department in Office of the Prime Minister. I am raising this issue because having various implementation centers raises the question of high cost of implementation. Isn't all these causing high costs of running out PDM, taking into account the fact that already we have our members of parliament and our ministers monitoring the implementation? Then again, we go and duplicate. So thank you, Derek.
An interesting question that raises other questions. This is Office of the Prime Minister in charge of coordination. So when they are concerned about the too many different centers, that requires really a conversation and who should be doing what. But you have also touched something for me that is fundamental for Honorable Margaret Muhanga here, being in charge of primary health care, the human resource. We don't want to debate the issue of health care workers. I hear questions there that we are failing to resolve. Yet that is at the center of the SDGs. So should be interested in hearing from even you at Office of the OPM, how you are supporting her to deliver the health care at the primary level. This conversation is true. You have the floor, sir. If your microphone doesn't work, we can always change to the one that worked.
Thank you. My name is Noah Omuya, and I represent young people in the Uganda Youth Coalition for SDGs. I am the regional coordinator for Eastern Uganda. First, a comment to the National Planning Authority. During the formalization of NDP3, you had young people included in the planning process, and a thank you to you and the UN in Uganda. Now, to Your Excellency Ambassador, Thank you for having the SDG champions in Uganda. But 23 is a small number. Uganda is one of the countries with high rates of, in a population, we have more than 75% of youth. And most of these youth are so engaged in the localization of SDGs. We now have what we call the Uganda Youth Coalition for SDGs under the SDG Secretariat. We have a constituency of young people all over the country. And if I am to begin counting for you how many I know in Eastern Uganda where I coordinate, there are so many. Since we are talking about partnerships for the localization, have you thought of having more engagements, maybe with the SDG Secretariat and the Youth Coalition for SDGs? Maybe tap into this potential that we have in the Youth Coalition for SDGs and extend what you're doing with the SDG champions and add even a number, because 23 is really small. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a hand over here. Let's take the microphone right over there. Glad that a lady will help me to punctuate these two men, but also to blend in the views of the ladies. They are always quite interesting views.
Thank you so much. My name is Irene Kagoya, and I work with World Vision. Mine is only a comment and a reflection on this conversation this morning. I think one of the major things that we need to do as stakeholders to ensure that we leave no one behind is to work on the approach of positive mindset change. This is very important because for many communities,
I think there are some people to be left behind the Bafere. They are disturbing our microphones.
Thank you. This is because for many communities, it's not that they do not have the capacities, that they do not have the resources to be able to change and improve their well-being, but rather it's because of the mindset that often is holding them behind. And at World Vision, one of the things that we're doing and the approaches we're undertaking is to work with religious leaders, is to work with communities to be able to understand that they can use the resources around them and build and empower themselves economically and socially. So even when we look at government putting mindset change as a critical pillar in the PDM framework, I think it's important that more investment is made in that area. Thank you.
There was a hand this side, but as the microphone makes its way, I really want to add some conversations to that. I have a history with World Vision. Not only were people struggling not to leave no one behind, but also leaving nothing behind. So from our World Vision programming, we would come and see what was left behind. And quite often you'll find government built a health facility, but the health facility is just lacking water. So we'll get into that. Support just for water. And not that they ignored it, but many times you find the water tank was put in and somebody vandalized the tap. Just the tap. So as the water is flowing in, it is also flowing out. Can these communities on, talking about localization, they must see that tank as theirs. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Sam Atul, the mayor of Lira City. I want to thank the organizers for this opportunity and platform. Two comments. One is going to the National Planning Authority. I heard you saying that the midterm review for NDP3 was done and many stakeholders were involved. But at a local government level, I'm hearing it for the first time in this space. How I pray that the involvement will come down to the local government level so that we understand what is going on. And the same again applies to the PDM lab. I'm also hearing about it for the first time in this platform. Now, when you say the feedback you're getting is coming from down, at the local government level, I've not interfaced with the PDM lab, and we have a number of issues that are coming from down. And right now, as we speak, it's like we have now too many cooks around PDM. And for us in Africa, when there are too many cooks, then you can be sure what is meant to be Malakwan will now become something else. And now I pray that this could be corrected so that we all move together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lira. That will be taken care of. It's okay to have too many cooks, but there must be a chief cook who tells the others what to do. That's the coordination aspects. I see another hand there, but as coming through, I want to give my experience of Lira when I came in a few years back on my research program, and I found one school was asking for money to construct classrooms because they had 2,000 children. But there was a school the other side which had 200. So this is not a classroom issue. This is not a distance issue. All these children are in the same city. So there must be something to sort out on the management side. So real understanding of what are the issues can help us leverage the NDP 4. So emphasizing the point of consultations. What are the real issues? I've seen a hand somewhere, right where the microphone is, and then you'll be another one, and then another one. I've lost out my numbers. So you're like number 5, number 6, and number 7. I've finally gotten there to 7.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rose Ofieno. I work with civil society, specifically Center for Conflict Resolution. I just want to re-echo on what the mayor and the moderators just said. For us in peace building, we term that conflict sensitivity. Very often we are trying to do things, but without consulting the people we are trying to help. And instead, things become negative. That example of the school is very, very vital. They usually call it white elephants. Mine is a concern, and probably it is to us all, part of which has been also re-echoed by the mayor about the consultations on national issues or even SDGs. As an organization, we have also been working on looking at SDGs because we are a peace-building organization. Our specific area has been SDG 16, but we take it as 16 plus because 16 is not a standalone SDG. When we are talking about leaving no one behind, I wanted to reflect back on the national consultations and festivals. I'm not sure whether these are the same regions that were consulted last year, but the mention of Lira, Mobende, Ginger, and whichever was, I just saw the Rwenzori missing. I saw the Great Northern and West Nile missing. I saw the Great Karamoja missing. And I don't know whether there are things that are being done in that area and how we are going to move this SDG to success, especially when you look at the area of Karamoja, because as an organization we have several engagements there. And looking at the targets that were highlighted, all of these are affected. Talk of energy, education, health, hunger, we all know what happened last year. Really, I don't know where the decision was not to take a festival to a region like this one that is so fragile. But since we are here to reflect and see a way forward, I really believe we shall have some recommendations that will take us forward and leave no one behind. Thank you.
Quite an interesting submission. And I've been in these spaces for some time with my friend Richard Sewachirianga. As a researcher, as a practitioner, what do we mean by consultation? What is the whole purpose? Sometimes we meet people, and every time I would sit in consultative meetings at budget frameworking level, they would always come and say, we gave you views, you never took them. That was when I was doing my tour of duty at the Ministry of Finance. And even next year, we would plan another consultation and never take their views. and never explain to them why. Data sometimes speaks. There is a district in the Lango sub-region which had 5 children who got first grade in PLOE, primary living examination. 5 first grades. 1 girl and 4 boys. If that is the situation at primary level, what do you expect at O level? Leave alone A level. Those are already left behind. Because without a primary living certificate, where are you going? Now, do I need to go and consult that district when your neighbor has already told me there are issues there? Yes, I need to go and consult them. But the conversation now changes. What are the issues? We are really formulating this not just as a conference. As I've said, this is the 2nd annual. We want to come back for the 3rd, and we have things to report. NPA, you should be taking notes, and I hope your teams are here. Policy labs, it's not just a lab. Everything that happens in a lab brings us something. That's why we are here. The COVID fellows, their lab produced a vaccine. By the 3rd, I really want to see where is the vaccine for some of these things. Who was my number 6? Are you sure you're number 6? Please proceed, you have your minute.
Thank you, sir. My name is Dennis Odota. I'm a lawyer and an SDG champion. Mine goes to NPA. It's indeed commendable that we've integrated the Sustainable Development Goals into the planning frameworks. And this goes to show that if we put our minds to it, we can actually make this work. We can realize the agenda. Of course, planning has to go hand in hand with the necessary resources. We don't want to be that nation that has all these beautiful plans on paper, and yet when it comes to our position in terms of realization, we're still above 100. So I think our work is cut out for us. You mentioned towards the tail end of your 2nd question that perhaps NDP 3 took on too much. And that's a good lesson. So as we go forward, I agree with you, we need to see what we can actually do, plan for what we can actually do. And also, when it comes to localization, the plans need to trickle down. I was part of the regional festivals, and across the regions, one of the issues was, where is the money? They talked about the budgets, and 50% of their budgets were going to the wage bill, paying the staff. So what remains for service delivery, according to them, is really minimal. So as we plan, let's plan both centrally and locally, if we are to take the localization message down to Omuntu Wawansi, like someone earlier mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this was really our challenge at the Ministry of Finance. Where is the money? So when the local governments were asking, where is the money? Even us at the Ministry of Finance were asking, where is the money? It's going to boil down around the money issues. And none of you is even going to tell me you have money. If I came to you to lend me some 10K, you'll tell me you don't have, and yet you are sitting on some amount of money. Is money hidden somewhere? Where was the other hand? Yes, you were the right one there. And then I'll come to you, and I'll end here. Oh, she has the microphone. After her, you just proceed. I'll cancel the man, and then we go and understand each other after the meeting.
Thank you, Moderator. My name is Patricia Shemere. By designation, I'm a special representative of the International Municipal Corporation of the BRICS. But by profession, I'm a nutritionist, and I'm also in food systems. My question goes to the ED from UBOS and the ambassador from Denmark Embassy, right? And I'll keep in copy the Minister of General Duties, Mama Justine,
because she's the most pragmatic leader that we have in Uganda. She has seen many things come to pass. We thank her, and the state minister that is here for health. Health information is one of the core functions of the health system and subsequently supports the country's ability to progress on the reporting of development goals. Now, I read a cancer statistic from UBOS in Kampala, and they said that about 80% of the registers that they sampled between particular years had all the demographic information. Like, you know, a patient visited a facility, they are male, they are 33, they have these underlying complications and all that. It means that the 20% were lacking where they come from, what their age is, and other important information. Now, while I would not want to completely vindicate this statistic, I would like to say that down in the health facilities, in the sub-regions, in the sub-health regions, it is even worse. And yet this information is what we use to feed into the central information system to be able to get these statistics and simultaneously track the progress of our goals. Now, my question is, what interventions does UBOS and the speaker that talked about shifting resources to local actors, is this one of the areas that you're looking at? Because the quality of data supports our decisions that we make and will help us realize these goals. Then also, the question of cancer. I would like to say that in the near future, I looked at the progress of the goals, and I looked at HIV. In the near future, cancer is going to be part of those people that are left behind if it doesn't actually displace HIV. And yet now, we do not have a referral pathway, a clearly outlined referral pathway for people that have signs or symptoms or that have already been diagnosed for cancer. It's just self-referral, and they come at later stages. We think that's an area that we need to look at. And lastly, as I said, I'm a nutritionist, and our motherland continues to be ravaged by high percentages of malnutrition. I've just read the UBOS 2023 June report, and our stunting rate is 29%. It means that about 3 of 10 of the children are short for their age, and 1 in 10 of the children are not growing properly or underweight, and only 15 have the right diet when they start feeding after breastfeeding. Minister Mama Justin, I would like to request you, and I would like to urge the government of Uganda to put a lot of effort on nutrition in this country, especially in the areas of human resource, nutritionists in health facilities, but also to support the behavioral change activities that are going on. Like, there's a program of Madam Work, making sure that a woman deep in the village can be able to use a mark tape to measure to be able to know the nutrition status of their child, and then know when to refer them to the hospital. Because as a developing country, if the burden of malnutrition increases and the only people we have in health facilities are those with severe acute malnutrition, it will be even bad for us because we cannot handle. But if we prevent it, it is cheaper and not expensive, like if we have to treat severe acute malnutrition.
Thank you very much. I liked it when he mentioned, I think it was Mugisha, food and nutrition. We don't just eat food. I keep telling my students, your body is not looking for meat, it's looking for proteins. They can come in form of beans, the body won't know. So the hunger, I haven't eaten meat for weeks, is your own imagination. The body is happy, the nutrition, the proteins are coming through. How do we keep the two linked up? But she raises also an important point. Again, my constituency from World Vision, we went into Karamoja, and what we're looking at, breastfeeding mothers. Because those children can only find their nutrition in that breast. It can only be in that breast if the mother ate. So when we went in the times of hunger, we looked for those breastfeeding mothers and families and took special attention on them. But as the dilemma of policy making, when you do consult a lot, I hear conversations of milk for school-going children. And I'm like, wait a minute. The people who really need milk are not yet in school, 0 to 5. So don't feed the 5, 6 to 13. But government can really come up with such a policy, put a burden on parents, you must feed the children in school. I think I need my 0 to 2. So can we do more consultation? Policy labs, my professor will resolve that. There was somebody with a microphone, and then somebody I'm going to agree with after, because you are coming next. So our conversation is sorted out. Madam.
Thank you so much. Mine is just simple. I'm Rashida Namowa, District Chairperson, Butambala. It goes to you and women. Let me take this opportunity to thank you for the great work that you are doing to support women out there. But allow me to ask, what efforts have you put in place to support women who always fear to stand with men and to stand with men in positions whereby some of them think that those positions were taken by, are supposed to be filled by men? A case in point is the position of Eria chairperson. They always call them chairman, not chairpersons. Thank you.
Or even chairwomen. When we go to women, you call it person. When you go to men, you call them men. But I think your notes will be very critical. How did you make it? We need to steal those notes from you and share them with women. You and women you've had. The answer is in the question. How did she make it? Want to replicate her. One more this side, and then I'll get back to my panel. I'm juggling a few things. From the cyberspace, I'm hearing noises that also need to be addressed.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and protocol observed. My name is Robert Kanusu. I'm the Deputy RCC of Mbarara City, but born from the source of the Nile in Jinja. My concern is a general one, which is about the core objective of the SDG story, reducing on the income gap between the very, very poor and the very, very rich. Dr. Albert has been very soft on referring to the very, very poor as those who are not included on the agenda or who are less included on the agenda. But to be straight, the issue is about how are we dealing with the poor communities, which number seems to be increasing against the number that is slightly okay, well off, and doing better. I think my observation on this, as I will seek more guidance from you, is how do we enforce the compliance of the SDG amidst the increasing income disparities? I work as an RCC in Mbarara, and the issues that come to our office really concern this. They are between two things: the very, very poor complaining about the very, very rich. We are being evicted from the wetlands, as the directive of the president is. What's the settlement plan of these people who are being deprived of a living? You have a pillar of the SDG about decent housing. Now these people end up there because they have nothing on themselves, and they end up seeking refugee or habitat where they can at least be, especially in urban areas. The slums have been increasing, especially in these new cities. The term has now come up to, they have come to know that they are now not safe. The cities came as a blessing in the first phase. now they are feeling the impact, the social cost of the city elevations. Now my concern is on, you want to fight poverty, people are trying to fight poverty by planting trees. At the same time, by growing rice in the wetlands. As you evict them from there per the directive, you are depriving them of another key pillar of survival, fighting hunger. Extreme poverty, again, increases. National Planning Authority, what is the plan? My question is a bit vague, but I hope you have understood exactly the complex matter that we are facing and which may derail the progress of the achievements of the SDGs. We have seen the statistics as raised by Dr. Albert and the people from the UBOS. I believe the challenge is upon us, living a very comfortable life against an increasing number of the youth who are above 40-something as being mentioned, who are poor and who can easily sabotage the achievement of those who are well off. So can we focus on that? God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I really want to appreciate the organizers for bringing the local leaders in this conversation. I've had a mayor, I've had a district chairperson, I've had an RCC. This is about localization. I needed the civil society from down there, but they are going to come through cyberspace. I would like at this point to invite the people online. This was not about us here. Some people online, please, the people moderating, allow some 1 or 2 people online to submit. Mention your name and take a minute to make your submission, else you run short of data.
Thank you very much. This is David. I would like to know, how can someone deep in the village get to know about the programs of the committee that runs the programs of the SDGs, such that whoever is there and is capable of doing something can also give a hand, or him or herself get involved in the programs? Thank you.
Thank you. Another voice from online. Honorable Minister Amos Logorobi, you're welcome. Bishop, you are welcome. I owe you coffee as you owe me tea, so we'll agree on which one comes first. Some online voice, please. Okay, there are no more online voices. We have packed a lot of questions. And having done computer programming, I always say short jobs first, in order to clear the queue. So who among you had the list of the questions? Let me begin from the extreme. Not that because they had the list of the questions, but this time I just want to start from the other side, coming this side.
Thank you very much.
Her Excellency.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be brief. Wanted to respond to things. The first was to Noah around youth engagement. Mostly I just wanted to thank you for what I heard was an invitation to engage, and we'll be very happy to engage. So thank you for that. Youth is a cross-cutting priority in our programming, but it's also a specific target group. The Danish Embassy has established a youth sounding board where we've picked youth from all of our programs and all of the regions, and we use this group to bounce off ideas, but also to give us feedback on our programming, on our implementation, how we're doing, and they're challenging us in looking at our programs and seeing how we can better target youth. Also, I mean, through that as well, we'll be happy to engage and have similar conversations with you. I would also like to say that as I mentioned before, youth-led organizations will be one of our priorities for funding civil societies in the next round. So we'll be announcing calls for proposals, and of course we are happy to see suggestions. The other I wanted to respond to was Patricia in terms of whether interventions to support data is also part of localizations and shifting power to local organizations and actors. And I would definitely say, yes, this is one of the areas that are extremely important. One of the things we would like to support, and I believe you should support if you support localization, is finding ways to empower local civil society organizations and other actors to bring evidence-backed advocacy towards government. One thing is doing advocacy based on rights and principles. That is also important. But can you back yourself up with strong evidence and data and stories? You have come much further. So this is definitely an important area. I wanted also just to take the opportunity to respond to one thing that was asked, but I wasn't able to answer, and my colleague from the National Planning Authority really alluded to a key principle I believe that the government could apply to really push leaving no one behind further. My colleague mentioned the human rights-based approach, and this is an approach that we also apply in our development programming. And it's something where I really think we, together with the government of Uganda, if this is applied, could take this even further in terms of leaving no one behind. We have good plans at the overall level and so on, but how do we really push that forward? And the key of leaving no one behind, as we also heard here, is really inclusive development, inclusion of all areas, of all people, of all groups. And what the human rights-based approach asks you is to really look at a couple of key principles for all your interventions or your priority setting. And one, of course, overall principle is that all human rights are for all human beings. That is a very simple principle, but when you apply it in practice, it's always difficult. You do that with the human rights-based approach, the way we implement it, and hopefully this is true for what the government is planning as well, through four key principles. One is participation, meaningful and inclusive participation. I think you have come a long way in the discussions here as well. The discussions have happened at local level. We have the local authorities engaged. This also means meaningfully including youth. The Danish youth in Denmark has developed through their organization this principle of saying nothing about us without us. I think this goes for all groups. If we are talking about women, we can't talk and not involve the women. If we're talking about youth, we need to involve the youth. If we are planning interventions for refugees, we need to involve the refugee-led organizations and so on. And it has to be in a meaningful and inclusive way where you are actually not just going around talking, but you are really listening and changing from what they come from. The second principle is non-discrimination and equality, that you apply the human rights, the development, the services to all, and this means no discrimination based on gender, age, sexual orientation, wealth, residence, health status, and so on. This is a key principle, and unless it is applied, you will not manage to leave no one behind. If you are discriminating, you are by definition leaving someone behind. So this is a key principle. Thirdly is accountability and rule of law for all. This is also what colleagues here has alluded to, that we need to be able to hold to account for what has been promised and planned and delivered. Somebody was asking where's the money? That can also apply to development partners. So it's not just holding governments accountable, it's also holding development partners accountable. It's also holding citizens accountable. If a government has, we have examples, for instance, where we help the government fund roads and then the citizens have promised to maintain. If they're not doing maintenance, you should also be able to hold them accountable. So the accountability goes all ways. But of course, mainly, how do we ensure that the citizen can hold the governments and the implementers accountable? And then the last one is the transparency and access to information, that we need to understand what's going on. We need to know what the plans are in our districts. We need to know what money is flowing where, so that we have the knowledge to actually take part of the planning, to take part of the implementation, and take part of the accountability. So I just want to say, I really think that if we are to push the leave no one behind, what the colleague from the National Planning Authority is mentioning is really, really the key, the human rights-based approach. If we apply it as governments, as development partners, as local actors, we will come a long way in leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You've really answered the question I was asked to ask you. That shows how much in charge you are of the space. This question was how government can leverage partnerships with development partners. You have already outlined the issues and the principles. The moment the principles are not clear, football cannot flow. We must all know what are the principles. And my professor boss here has been kind enough. I no longer teach principles of development economics. I leave others to teach them. Then I say, how do we apply them? So mine is how do we apply the principles? And my colleagues help me to do the teaching of the principles. So in the planning process, they have already told you where they are, and the other development partners. I'm happy there are good conversations between government and development partners. We just need to see how do we bring them in. Mr. RCC mentioned about the very rich and the very poor. Some of these things in our principles, we talk about intergenerational poverty. We talk about chronic poverty. In that district where there were 4 first grades, what do you expect? That generation is already going to be poor. And the next, that's the intergeneration. So if we do not apply the principles that come from the policy labs, we will have lost it at that level. We can't cure poverty next year, but we can lay the foundations this year of curing poverty going forward. That's what the planning is all about. Evelyn, you had them. We'll discuss the UN men later. For now, there were questions for you. And maybe your closing remarks as well.
Okay, I thought I would not get the chance. I was worried I'd been left behind. So we had one question that came from the chairperson for Butambala. I think we might, have lunch together and talk a little bit about that. What I can simply say maybe for now is that as UN Women, we have a whole thematic area on women's political participation, because we fundamentally believe that when we have more women in decision-making spaces, right from local government up to the highest level, then perspectives of women, needs of women can be addressed, but also issues around inclusivity can be put there. So in this program, we work with women aspirants, starting to prepare them to, including confidence. How do you speak? How do you start building consensus? If you're going to stand for a political position, we work with the Electoral Commission. So a whole program area, and I'm happy to speak to you about that. In terms of closing remarks, and I had hoped that we would have a second round of questions, but I will try to summarize what I had hoped to talk about. We spoke elaborately about the Gender Social Norms Index and said that perhaps it's one of the big puzzles that is missing and holding us back in achieving our aspirations for the SDGs. I have a colleague, I think, from World Vision who did say that we have a pillar on mindset change in PDM, and in different ways we try to do work around social norms and mindset change. But I think we sometimes throw around the words on social norms and do not really unpack what they mean. I think we sometimes even trivialize them when it comes to prioritization, because we have so many issues, and so we try to sometimes deal with the bigger issues before we come to this. But I hope that from this conversation we will realize that we could put in place all the formal processes. Yeah, we could put in place the judicial systems, could put in place the schools, we will put in place the hospitals, but when the value systems that people hold are still not addressed, there will be the white elephants that we start to see. And 2 things for me around addressing social norms. One is, in the bid of addressing social norms, we usually focus on changing the old norms. So we are looking for the hardcore people and saying they must change. But what are we learning from the field? That while it is good to change those norms that are old, what actually works more is when new norms can be created in a way that starts to overcome and question the old norms. So as you're working, for example, with the men that are using violence in your communities, saying you must change, you must do all this, when you start working with young people to start to see a view of equality in relationships and alternatives to violence, you start creating a generation that starts to grow, and gradually they start saying, I don't want to be like that. So how do we do social norms work? How do we do mindset work would be critical. The second one is around recognizing that for social norms to change, there needs to be a tipping point. And so isolated instances, few radio programs here and there, may not necessarily change these deeply held norms. It is important to build a critical mass of people that reach a place where we recognize the consistency and people start saying, really, this needs to end. And I think for me, it takes me to the issues around inclusiveness that we are hoping to, and we are engaging on today. And sitting here, for example, and looking at religious leaders, very, very critical partners that people listen to, even those who object to very many things on Sunday, go to church and pay attention. How do we start working with different categories of people so that there is a consistency, there is a critical mass of people, as I said, that can help us to tip the point to change social norms. Of course, a host of many, many other issues that can be addressed, including strengthening social protection so that we don't leave people behind, issues around working with the private sector, strengthening insurance, increasing access to economic opportunities for women and girls to be able to address the social shocks and economic shocks that the groups that we spoke about experience. So I want to end there, but to just say that it is possible to shift norms. We have seen norms shift. They are difficult, but when we are strategic in how we do that, and I think we can be strategic. This space is one where we can start to be more strategic in how we engage social norms. And I think perhaps our next report card will be better than 17%. Thank you very much.
A round of applause to Evelyn about the social norms, and she mentions very critical things regarding all things must be put in place. That's inclusiveness. Leaving no one behind will require many programs. I know we have talked about issues of SME recovery. In the ministry, we planned for 200 billion, and then only less than 10 billion was taken up. I said maybe the word recovery was not inclusive. There are those that needed SME resuscitation, not recovery yet. There are those that needed SME resurrection. They died in these shock things. So if you're only coming to recover the living, you are going to leave some people behind in the mortuary and in the graveyard. What plan did we design to resurrect them, resuscitate them, and then they can recover? These processes have to be very inclusive. And one of the people doing that is Jeffrey Sachs. I will tell you my story. Are we ready? Okay. But my experience with Jeffrey Sachs, we were in the business of restructuring the National Planning Authority, and rest in peace, Honorable Ojok. We decided to go and visit one of those millennium villages. You remember them, men? And when we went there, we found government had done everything. A health center 3 with solar energy, with an ambulance, with everything there well fenced off. I had gone with the minister in charge of planning as we improved the plan and were bringing in the NDP1. While we were there were journalists. We had the district chairperson. This is Signe. And to our surprise, a media person came and said, there is a woman delivering there. Somebody was delivering just outside the fence of the health facility. What happened? It wasn't about access. She had come at 3 a.m. Labor pains, they graduate. By 11, she was ready to give birth. And she found a safe place outside the fence. had to leave the hospital to go and deliver outside the hospital because the midwife comes at 12. And the maternity ward is locked until she comes. Small issues, but they really matter. Here I was with the minister in charge of planning. It informed our NDP1. How do we make sure the last mile matters? And when we asked the midwife finally, when she turned up, say, the man I get paid, I can't buy food. I'm supposed to be here 24/7. You know what that means? So I begin in the morning when I'm still energetic in my gardens. Remember, women don't have an agenda on what time to deliver. The last mile matters. Leaving no one behind is going to ask us to ask the questions we've never asked ourselves. And this is the question of the midterm review. Let me go to the policy labs as we plan for a transition into. That was my experience with Millennium Development Goals, but what it means is to go down to consult and find out what are the real issues. It is very easy to say absenteeism of health workers. Put clock in and clock out. You're paying them 200,000. It includes their lunch, fees, and their own medical treatment. Policy labs, is this part of the labs? Don't get biased by my opinions. You had your views, but please incorporate them along the way as we write a report about this conference for the 3rd annual SDG conference.
Thank you, moderator. Now, let me just start by giving you our journey. We are a fairly young outfit. The technical work on the lab began in December 2022. And up to this point, our first step, because this is a multi-stage process for the lab, our first step has been to put together the ingredients that will eventually end up in the lab to be analyzed. So where are we so far with these ingredients? Number one, we've prepared background papers to inform, which we think will inform the discussions in the lab and the consultations. And we've done this so far across 9 different areas, spanning from community profiling, spanning from access to markets. We have issues of which enterprises can do well in which parts of the country, and what size of land do you need to do for what. All these things, at least at the first stage, have been put together as part of preparing the ingredients that go and that should go into the lab. And even as part of this background work and the ingredients, we can already see certain things emerging. And at the technical level, we are looking at 3 different things for now. One is to come up with an implementation strategy for the Parish Development Model, which I think we will all agree is missing up to this point. And up to this point, we have a draft implementation strategy, which should be subjected to further scrutiny. So that's one key output coming through. Number 2, we also coming up with the emerging issues. Remember, so far it is over 1 year of implementation, and there are certain things out there. And I think one interesting example is that much of the attention is moving away from all the other pillars of PDM only to the financial inclusion pillar, and even in financial inclusion, only the parish revolving fund. And there are many things that the PDM intended to do. So we are putting together the emerging issues. We are not waiting for mid-term review of PDM. The emerging issues should be attended to as they come, so that you don't wait for the mid-term review. It might be too late in our view. That is the second broad area that we are interested in addressing. But then number 3, given that we have the 7 pillars of the Parish Development Model, we think that it's important that for each of these pillars, we come with a focused strategy for each pillar. If it is financial inclusion, for example, is what we are doing the best delivery mechanism, or is it possible to do it differently? So for each pillar, we need to be looking out for these answers. And then the strategy should be telling us the linkages, how do you sequence, and what implementation structures do you require. So this is where we started from, stage 1, prepare the ingredients. Then number 2, we'll now graduate into the stakeholder engagement and consultations. Give us your feedback and insights on these emerging issues, on what we are proposing as the strategy. So at stage 2, we should be able to do the engagement, the consultations, which should begin in this month of July that we are going to start. And then that should be followed by validation. And once we've gone through all these, then we enter the lab with a few technocrats, a few policymakers to tease out the issues, incorporate the political economy issues, and come with the product. So this is how we are sequencing our work. Now, to answer then the question from my friend Patrick Okello, we are not an implementing outfit at all. We are just picking information and which we think can help improve the implementation. But in doing that, yes, we have now representation from the OPM delivery unit. We have representation from there, Mr. Joseph Enyimu and the team. We have all these agencies that we are working with. And the other question then was about the consultative engagements and that we have not been seen out there consulting. So the reason is that we had to, at least at the technical level, start off with some ingredients, some preparations, and then we come when we have some preliminary ideas, then that we can consult on and debate for refinement and then final destination to the lab. Maybe the last thing I should say then is that the lab then should be a continuous process, because the issues will not stop after one round of consultations or even after our midterm review, but issues keep coming up. We need to study each of the pillars, propose strategies, but as you implement, issues emerge, and you have to incorporate these, if possible, as quickly as possible, so that you don't wait at the end and then begin to think that we wish we had done, we wish we had given this attention in real time. So I think, Mr. Moderator, that will clarify on what we are doing and how I wish we could have such a platform to consult with after we have received our ingredients in the near future, so that we benefit from all the insights that are out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Hisali. Round of applause to him. Blending the academics and the practice, the policy and practice and the academia is a very critical space that I'm glad the UN has supported this. Well, in 1990, when I walked into Makerere University, they told me your lecture for geography is in theater number 2. I said, but theaters are for medical students. What am I going to do in theater? So when you hear lab, we are not talking about the biology lab. This is a conversation of laboratory where ideas and chemicals, these are chemicals from the brains, meet and come up with results. And what I've liked about this is real-time issues. Because you're discussing, and the politicians here have 2 years left to the other year. So Honorable Kasule Lumumba here will be wondering, are you for me or are you against me? But as you've said, you keep incorporating, because he needs those views to go along. I have just listened to the president telling us, why don't people begin to pay back after 2 years? So what you thought was a revolving fund, it will go and stay there for 2 years. There is nothing coming back. So how do I add more people? Those conversations get into the lab and they actually come out. Because the politicians are the owners of these programs. We just want to make sure we feed into those conversations as they go along. Science must inform our practice and the very many things we do. I don't want to stand in between you and your lunch, because it's 1 o'clock and lunch should be served soon. But allow me to finish with the 2 people remaining on the panel so that we all go for lunch knowing the afternoon is a different session. You deal with the statistics. Dr. Mukiza, there were some questions for you. There are things you may want to wind up with in this conversation. We've talked about the data and its importance really for us to get in there. Your closing remark and maybe some end responses to the questions that came to you.
We received one question from the audience, and I got one question from you, moderator. So I'll start with Patricia. Is it Patricia? On the intervention UBOS is doing to strengthen the health information systems. I want to start by saying that one of the difficult tasks is coordination. Coordinating the national statistical system is one of our mandates. And we discuss with all stakeholders, including MDAs and local governments, on how we can strengthen the administrative data. Of course, our conversation with the Minister of Health, in as far as HIMS is concerned, has gone very far, and we're happy that we can now access the health information system real time, online. And when we do that, we look at how we can strengthen the administrative data registers from the Ministry of Health. Those other indicators we are talking about, we're also working with those agencies dealing with civil registration and vital statistics to ensure that we have robust registers and records. Of course, these administrative data that are generated by the ministries and agencies, sometimes they collect these out of their day-to-day work, and eventually it forms part of the statistics. So we are trying to see how we can standardize and also address the demands from the public, how the information that is missing can be collected. In the morning, I was discussing with the moderator that the Ministry of Health, to allocate resources, they look at number of beds, is it? Or bed occupancy. Yet, you may have, a hospital may have beds, but there are no patients. Or there may be more patients than beds. So if you target beds, then you don't get to the people who are utilizing the hospitals. So the issue is that we need to strengthen the administrative data sources and also stress them with the regular surveys and censuses. Regarding the nutrition status vis-a-vis food availability, it's clear that there are other correlates beyond food availability that determine the nutrition status, the stunted-ness of people. You may be consuming enough food, but the water, access to clean water, jeopardizes the benefits. The proteins you are getting may be jeopardized by the dirty water you are taking. So also water and sanitation becomes an issue. So there it is not the Ministry of Agriculture and Health alone. Then also the education. The education contributes, access to education contributes to the nutrition because you would know what kind of food. Then of course the economic pressure. One of the districts I will not mention, which is in Southwest, produces a lot of food. But the number of stuntedness is high because people are looking to sell, to get money, and they leave the children starving. So, and that's where now the question of mindset, you are saying we are throwing mindset just like that. We need to go deeper and explain that it's not the real money that matters. First feed your household, homestead, and then the surplus should be used for the resources. I think that's, we are trying to coordinate and standardize the administrative data sources from the agencies that generate them. Moderator, you asked about the big data.
Yes, quickly.
The big data and how we want to place ourselves in harnessing the big data. Yes, at the Bureau of Statistics, we have now taken in consideration that there is a lot of data being generated down there, and we have set up a structure that will be able to address that. We have data scientists now. We are going to establish a data science laboratory, but this one is different from the laboratory of the universities. This is a real lab that will be generating, harvesting all the big data, and we use it and see how we can mainstream it into the official statistics. And I'm happy that the minister has come here, supported us in trying to go towards that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Dr. Mukiza. The reason we're looking at big data issues really is very important. Uganda's GDP this year, or thereabout, was 163 trillion shillings. Momo alone last year transacted 92 trillion. Big data, that's what I had.
Can I correct you?
I'm looking at the other year, not this one that you're on.
Okay, so why are you giving all data?
No, I'm not showing the data, but I'm trying to emphasize the big data, the electronic data. So for me, the interesting part is when more than half of your GDP is moving on Momo alone, leave alone the other one of Airtel, there is that cap provision of what is the money doing. Remember reason? You want to go there and say, what was the reason for this movement? What are people doing? The data is in there. So we are going to work with UBOS to see how do we mine that data to understand. But he has also talked about beds. I know the doctors have what they call a bed occupancy rate. So why don't we use that? Planning. You don't have to answer all the questions, there were many, but because you are planning NDP4. So carry them along in NDP4. So what is it, as they call it, a katalekeka? Because I have 2 minutes for you, sir.
Thank you, Moderator. As you've already stated, I have quite a handful, but allow me also to inform the conference that I do in a special way recognize the arrival of the Honorable Minister in Charge Planning, who was the key leader during the midterm review process. Welcome, sir. A few questions. were around issues of how have we domesticated the SDGs in our NDP3. I think I spoke to this earlier, but what I can promise is that in the future, we now need to demonstrate to you by mapping all of these 17 Sustainable Development Goals into our NDP3, and it does fit. They can all be fitted there. So the quick answer to Patrick is that yes, our development planning framework is highly responsive to the SDGs. You asked further question on how can we popularize the participation of the local population in the implementation of the SDGs. Remember, once we have aligned our national development plan to the SDGs, then the participation of the local population in the national government programs is intended in a way to also ensure their participation in the achievement of the SDGs. So that is taken care of through the different programs that we have designed. And so I can just mention, for instance, the PDM. The conference participants will know that this is one of the implementation architecture, which is meant to ensure the localization of the population's participation in our own development, but also overall addressing the SDGs. Allow me speak to one of the programs in 1 minute. Okay. We have a big problem, and I want this conference to be alive to this issue. You alluded to it, that government put in place a stimulus fund for the SMEs. The uptake of this particular stimulus facility was low. Why? Because we have yet to hustle and struggle with our private sector. So the private sector development program needs to come to terms with how we reduce informality around how we do business. The reason the uptake was low is that the conditions were asking for information, for records, and Dr. Muhumuza, these were not available with our enterprises. So reducing informality going forward is going to be a very key issue, even into the NDP4. Finally, the issue of participation is important, and we did discuss this earlier. The Honorable Mayor from Lira questioned whether, I want to say that again, within the resources available, the National Planning Authority was only able to have representative participation of different local governments. For instance, we had the urban centers or the urban authorities represented. We had the peri-urban. We had the rural local governments representing the rest. So, but sorry, we did not come to you particularly, but you were represented. Also, Dennis made a very important point, and I think for the benefit of this conference, it is good for you to note, how are we aligning budgets to the plan? All of you would be asking this question. I can tell you that this process has been enabled by the provisions of the law. NPA produces, in accordance with the amended act of the Public Finance Management Act, section, I think 17, subsection 3, directs the National Planning Authority to make an assessment on how the budget of the country is aligned to its plan. So we do issue these certificates of compliance to inform, especially the critical decision makers, such as Cabinet and Parliament. And this we issue to Parliament. The honorable members of Parliament do receive this, and it is aimed at helping them in their oversight role to keep the implementation of the plan accountable to that process. So I want to conclude by saying, Patricia alluded to something that is again very important. What are we doing around service delivery standards? The question she actually posed is to say, as we deliver government services, do we have standards which we hold ourselves accountable to? Currently, there are some MDAs have their own and so on, but the ministry, I'm happy the minister himself is here, of public service, is working with the National Planning Authority to develop these service delivery standards. And we do believe it will also go a long way to enhance the delivery of government services. The final one, National Planning Authority coordinates planning at the national level, at the MDA level, and at the local government level. So it means that at all levels, when we have done the alignment, the SDGs are therefore accounted for up to the local government level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Ojok. Another round of applause for my panelists, and I will ask them to take leave of this.